A man sits in a sterile room, his eyes bloodshot and wide with terror. He hasn't slept in weeks. His hands shake uncontrollably as he stares at shadows that aren't there. This isn't fiction. This is what happens when governments decide to weaponize sleep deprivation. The story you've heard about Soviet prisoners kept awake for 30 days might be fake, but the real experiments were far more disturbing. What I'm about to show you will change how you think about sleep forever. You've probably seen it shared across social media, the Russian sleep experiment. 5 prisoners kept awake for 30 days using some mysterious gas. They supposedly turned into monsters, clawing at their own flesh and begging never to fall asleep again. It's terrifying, it's detailed, and it's completely made up. This creepypasta first appeared online in 2010, crafted by horror writers who wanted to create the perfect nightmare fuel. But here's the thing that makes it so effective. It's based on a kernel of truth. Real governments really did conduct sleep deprivation experiments. They just didn't need 30 days to break someone's mind. Let me take you back to World War II. German soldiers were marching across Europe with an unusual advantage. They called it Pervitin, but you know it by another name, methamphetamine. These weren't just isolated cases of drug abuse. This was systematic, military-issued enhancement. German command distributed millions of these pills to their troops, keeping them alert and aggressive for days at a time. The results were immediate and devastating. Soldiers could march for 50 hours straight without rest. Tank crews stayed operational through multi-day battles, but the human cost was staggering. Men would collapse from exhaustion once the drugs wore off. Others developed severe psychosis, becoming violent and unpredictable. Some never recovered their mental stability. The Allies weren't about to let Germany have this advantage. American and British forces quickly developed their own versions. Benzedrine and dexedrine became standard issue for pilots on long missions. The U.S. Air Force was handing out amphetamines like candy during the Vietnam War and even into the Gulf War. But these weren't just battlefield drugs, they were research tools. Military scientists wanted to understand exactly how far they could push human endurance before the mind snapped. What they discovered was both fascinating and horrifying. Sleep deprivation doesn't just make you tired. After 24 hours without sleep, your brain starts playing tricks on you. You see things that aren't there. You hear voices in empty rooms. Your judgment becomes severely impaired. Push it to 48 hours, and the hallucinations become impossible to distinguish from reality. Now imagine adding powerful stimulants to this equation. The drugs keep your body awake, but they can't stop your brain from deteriorating. You're trapped in a waking nightmare, fully conscious, but losing your grip on reality. This is what military researchers were studying in labs across America and Europe. The CIA took this research even further with their MKUltra program. From the 1950s through the 1960s, they conducted experiments on unwitting subjects, combining sleep deprivation with LSD, truth serums, and other mind-altering substances. Many subjects were psychiatric patients who had no idea they were being used as test subjects. One documented case involved a Canadian woman who was kept in a medically induced coma for 88 days while being subjected to electroshock therapy and drug treatments. When she finally woke up, she had lost most of her memory and couldn't recognize her own family. The psychological damage was permanent. At Edgewood Arsenal, the U.S. Army conducted similar experiments on soldiers, often without their full consent. They tested everything from LSD to chemical weapons, documenting how these substances affected human behavior and mental stability. The goal wasn't healing or understanding, it was weaponization. But you don't need exotic drugs to break someone's mind. Sleep deprivation alone is devastatingly effective. In the 1950s, researchers discovered that keeping someone awake for just 5 days could induce complete psychological breakdown. Subjects would experience paranoid delusions, violent outbursts, and complete loss of reality testing. The scary part? These effects often lasted long after the experiment ended. Many subjects never fully recovered their mental stability. They developed chronic anxiety, depression, and in some cases, permanent psychosis. The human brain simply isn't designed to function without sleep, and pushing it past its limits causes irreversible damage. If you're finding this as disturbing as I am, Make sure you're subscribed because we're diving deep into more classified experiments that governments don't want you to know about. What makes these real experiments so much more terrifying than the fictional Russian sleep experiment is their clinical, systematic nature. These weren't desperate measures during wartime. These were carefully planned research programs, conducted by educated scientists with government funding and approval. The researchers knew exactly what they were doing to their subjects. They documented every symptom, every breakdown, every moment of psychological collapse. They weren't trying to create monsters like in the creepypasta. They were trying to understand how to break human minds efficiently and predictably. The results were consistent across different programs and countries. Sleep deprivation, combined with stimulants, created a perfect storm of psychological destruction. Subjects would remain physically alert, while their mental faculties completely disintegrated. They became paranoid, aggressive, and completely detached from reality. One former test subject described the experience as being trapped in a horror movie where you can't tell what's real and what's hallucination. Your own thoughts become your enemy. Every shadow might be a threat. Every sound could be an attack. And unlike in the movies, there's no escape, no moment of relief. The most disturbing part isn't what these experiments revealed about sleep deprivation. It's what they revealed about human nature. Governments around the world were willing to sacrifice their own people's mental health for the possibility of military advantage. They treated human consciousness like a machine to be tested to its breaking point. These programs only stopped when they became politically inconvenient, not because anyone suddenly developed a conscience. The research was classified, the subjects were silenced, and the results were filed away in government archives. Most victims never received compensation or even acknowledgement of what was done to them. The technology has evolved, but the mentality remains the same. Modern military forces still use stimulants to keep soldiers alert during extended operations. The drugs are safer and more targeted, but the fundamental principle hasn't changed. Human endurance is just another resource to be optimized and exploited. Today's soldiers can stay awake for days using modafinil and other newer stimulants. The side effects are supposedly minimal, but we're still learning about the long-term consequences. How many veterans are dealing with mental health issues that trace back to chemically altered sleep cycles during deployment? The fictional Russian sleep experiment captures our imagination because it represents our deepest fears about government power and human experimentation. But the real experiments were worse because they actually happened. Real people suffered. Real minds were broken. Real lives were destroyed. And here's what should keep you awake at night. These programs never really ended. They just became more sophisticated, more targeted, and better hidden. The same scientific principles that drove those Cold War experiments are still being studied and refined today. The boundary between enhancing human performance and destroying human consciousness is thinner than most people realize. Every advancement in neuroscience, every new understanding of sleep and consciousness can be turned into a weapon. The question isn't whether governments will use this knowledge to hurt people. The question is whether we'll know about it when they do. The most chilling part of this story isn't the experiments themselves. It's how easily they were covered up, how quickly the victims were forgotten, and how the same research continues today under different names. While you've been learning about these historical horrors, scientists in laboratories around the world are pushing the boundaries of human consciousness even further. The methods have evolved, but the goal remains the same: to understand exactly how much the human mind can endure before it